Merry Christmas! I'm here at the birthplace of John Humphrey Noyes for Christmas in Putney, Vermont. This was his family home. John Humphrey Noyes, of course, was the founder of the Oneida community, the socialist complex marriage community in Oneida, New York. Somebody that I consider a spiritual leader that I look to sometimes. Even though parts of his beliefs I don't agree with. But John Humphrey Noyes believed that the second coming of the Christ would be a spiritual event, not a physical event, but he was a pre-millennialist in the sense that he believed that Christian people on earth had to establish a society that would pave the way to usher in that new heaven and new earth that it talks about in Revelation. So, Merry Christmas. Let us all remember the rebirth of the sun, the rebirth of light, and the continued revelation as we go into the season when we'll start to get longer and longer days now. So, Merry Christmas. Hi, my name is Mitchell K. Jones. I'm a recent master's degree graduate from the College of Brockport and from the Department of History. And I'm excited today to talk to you about Asa and Huldah Anthony. Now, what you're hearing in the background is an example of a phalanx. A phalanx is a military formation where a group of people all move in the same direction. And Asa and Huldah Anthony were members of the Sodus Bay Phalanx. In this sense, phalanx was used by the French utopian thinker Charles Fourier to mean a commune of people that all work and live together in Charles Fourier's system. Asa and Huldah Anthony were Fourierists from 1843 to about 1846. The Sodus Bay Phalanx existed up there in Sodus Bay. They bought a pre-existing community from the Shakers, actually also known as the United Believers in the Second Coming of Christ, who were a utopian religion that came to America in the late 1700s. Asa and Huldah Anthony were good friends of Amy and Isaac Post, who along with them and Frederick Douglass and also Benjamin and Sarah Fish, who are also involved in the Sodus Bay Phalanx, they formed the Western New York Anti-Slavery Society. And they were active on the Underground Railroad, and they helped many slaves get to freedom by going up to Canada through Lake Ontario. Asa and Huldah Anthony, along with the Posts and the Fishes, were Hicksite Quakers, which was a radical Quaker movement that was opposed to slavery. Later on, they became more interested in spiritualism, and actually Asa and Huldah Anthony were at the center of a controversy within the Sodus Bay Phalanx between religious conservatives and religious liberals. Asa had worked on the Sabbath. He harvested grain on a Sunday, and according to the Sodus Bay Phalanx Constitution, this was allowed for personal reasons, but not for phalanx work. And an impeachment proceeding was brought against him, and he ended up being acquitted. And it was one of the key contentious moments in the Sodus Bay Phalanx between the religious conservatives and the religious liberals. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed my small presentation here about Asa and Huldah Anthony. So here's the roofless church. It's built in 1960 by that architect that I mentioned earlier. Very beautiful spot here. Out here you can see there's a section where you can kind of sit and revere the cornfield that's back here. Here's a beautiful sculpture. I don't know if you can see it with the rain here, but here's the plaque. It says the ceramic sculpture was inspired by a 15th century wood carving in the National Museum of Krakow. Was created by Eva Cygulska for the Batavia Trust in 1968 to honor the invincible spirit of the Polish people and human fortitude. And as I leave the roofless church here, get a load of this golden gate here from the Baffler design. Very beautiful. And as I walk down the street here, you can see in the background of me the Harmonist cemetery there. There's a couple of original cabins. Apparently there's some ghost legends about this place. Sometimes people see lights and things, different ghosts. You can see in the background there the Athenaeum. That's a big building that was built later. Now it's a visitor center for New Harmony, but sort of a artistic, agricultural, architectural building there. That's one of the famous landmarks here in New Harmony, although it was built later. And we're going to skip across the road here to the roofless church here of the original Harmonists. And let's look at this marker right here. This says, as Sarah Campbell Baffler believes that creative crafts deserve the instruction, support, and honor accorded to the fine arts, this studio for pottery dedicated to this philosophy, to the quest for equality and mainspring of her life. So here's the pottery studio. All right, let's go to the roofless church. All right, and one last stop here on my walk through New Harmony, the town of New Harmony, Indiana. Here is McClure Park. William McClure was a geologist, one of the most well-known scientists at the time. So you can see the symbols here, geology. He came over to New Harmony on the boatload of knowledge when Robert Owen invited him. Golden Rain Tree, which is down here, and the Working Men's Institute, which we just saw. So let's go over here to this little pavilion and by the old rain tree here. And let's look at this little so this is a little farm stand here, and there's a little plaque, and it says, "Dreaming of another day in which you join with me and see eye to eye the glory of an early sky reserved for days to be." That's Carroll A. Barrett, 1945. So this is farm stand dedicated to the memory of William McClure, built later. But that's our little tour around New Harmony. So I'm here at Batavia Cemetery. Actually, the reason I'm here is because Albert Brisbane is buried here, who's somebody that I've researched a lot. He was sort of the John the Baptist of the Fourierist movement in Western New York and the rest of the United States. He translated a lot of Charles Fourier's works from French into English, so he sort of spurred on the Fourierist socialist movement. But also buried here is actually the only Confederate veteran that's buried north of the Mason-Dixon line. And there actually used to be a Confederate flag next to this grave. Looks like there no longer is. Maybe somebody took it down, or maybe the town took it down. I'm not sure. But apparently, so this is Philemon Tracy. He died in 1862. Apparently his uncle took his body back up to Western New York from a battlefield, and his family is actually still buried in Macon, Georgia, but his uncle actually brought him all the way back up here to Batavia, which was his hometown. But what I'm going to talk about today for the assignment is the Confederate War Memorial in Dallas. And the reason I picked this location is actually because it's related to, at least spatially, just as the last segment was spatially related to the Fourierist movement. The section in Dallas where this Confederate War Memorial was until 2020 was considered the Reunion District of Dallas, and Reunion District was named after La Réunion, which was a French Fourierist colony. It was actually after, really the Fourierist movement in the United States. The homegrown Fourierist movement had waned in 1847, 1848. But Victor Considerant
Fourier's disciple in France came to Texas in 1854 to try and start yet another Fourierist phalanx in the United States. It didn't work out, and I think it only lasted until 1855. But that area sort of became known as a French area because a lot of French people went there and settled there because of the Fourierist phalanx there. So one of the places, though, that's actually closer to where the actual La Réunion commune was in Dallas, it's actually a couple miles maybe away from the Reunion district. But they had, again, until recently, until they changed the name, there was, let's see, what was it called? There's Sidney Lanier Expressive Arts Vanguard Elementary School in Dallas. And so they changed the name recently. Now I can't remember what they changed the name to. But Lanier was had no real connection to Texas. He was born in Macon, Georgia, died in Lynn, North Carolina, is buried in Baltimore. So all over the place. But he was a poet and a Confederate veteran, and he wrote, a lot of poems, writing romantically about how great the Ku Klux Klan is and all that kind of stuff. But he was of French Huguenot ancestry, so I wonder if the fact that was the site of the Reunion colony might have something to do with why they chose a Confederate poet. So this Confederate War Memorial in Dallas was erected by the United Daughters of the Confederacy, Dallas Chapter Number 6 in 1897. And like I said, it was moved to that cemetery and then was removed in June of 2020. There were actually some state laws. The city was sued by a group called the Return to Lee Park. And they sued the city under the Texas Open Meetings Act and Texas Antiquities Act. But ultimately, they did get the monument removed. So when it went up in 1897, the head of the Dallas chapter of the United Daughters of Confederacy was Kate Doswell Cable. And she was the granddaughter of Confederate veteran and thrice elected mayor of Dallas, William Lewis Cable, whose portrait is included in bas-relief marble on the monument's base. Interestingly, Earl Cable, Cable's grandson, was Dallas mayor in 1863 when JFK was assassinated. So, I have to think that maybe his ancestor may have still had some clout in the South even into the 60s when JFK was assassinated there.
By way of contrast to some of the things we've been talking about so far, this is the Soldiers and Sailors Monument in downtown Rochester, New York. And it was erected in 1892, and you can see the inscription there. It says, "To those who faithful until death gave their lives for their country, 1861 to 1865. And there's an image of a soldier up at the top. The Frederick Douglass Monument in Rochester, erected in 1899, was sort of a response to the Soldiers and Sailors Monument. An African-American activist, John W., can't remember the last name right now, agitated for the Soldiers and Sailors Monument in 1894, but recognized that there was also a need to memorialize the struggle of abolitionists and the contribution of abolitionists to the ending of slavery in this country. So the Frederick Douglass Monument was originally closer to downtown near the train station, and then was moved here to Highland Park, and actually, in fact, was originally further down in the park, and recently, I think it was maybe 2-3 years ago, was moved up here, has a nice new sort of base for the pedestal and everything, and they've really done quite a great job remodeling this park. So I'm here in Mount Hope Cemetery, and as I walk to the Civil War Memorial here, I do want to just mention a few things that I failed to mention while I was at the Frederick Douglass Monument. So John W. Thompson was his name, the African-American activist. He was also a member of a Black Masonic Lodge, in Rochester, and he was the one that organized the funds and really got both the Soldiers and Sailors Monument and the Frederick Douglass Monument built. So here's the Civil War Monument at Mount Hope Cemetery. It was built in 1908. I really don't know much about how this got built or who funded it, but if you notice the inscription here, so it has this poem on flames, eternal camping ground, their silent tents are spread, and glory guards with solemn round the bivouac of the dead. And this notation here is taps, so I'll sing it to you. Da 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 da. And you can see as well around here, there's all these white grave markers. These are all Union soldiers from Rochester, New York that died in the Civil War. Hello, I am here at the West Seneca Historical Society here, and this was also known as the town of, I think this was Middle Ebenezer, but I'll have to figure that out. This building was one of the Ebenezer buildings, but it was actually moved here in the 50s. But the Ebenezer, so there were three actually Ebenezer communities, Upper Ebenezer, Lower Ebenezer, and Middle Ebenezer. They're not all part of the town of West Seneca, but you can see the historical marker over my shoulder here. So Ebenezer was the first community in the United States of the community of true inspiration. So a lot of the Ebenezer buildings are today private residences and have been remodeled, but one of the most recognizable as a 19th century building is the Holy Helpers Church here on Indian Church Road in West Seneca. And this was actually Middle Ebenezer, and as you can see on the sign says, the site of original Middle Ebenezer Memorial Church built on handmade bricks. Christian Metz held the first church service on March 1846. When Ebenezer Society moved to Iowa in 1864, property was bought by 14 Holy Helpers Church congregation and altered to meet their requirements. Walls of the apse of present church are the original Ebenezer Church walls. So here you can see the Ebenezer Church walls, and we'll go towards the front and you can see the mosaic and the Catholic art that the 14 Holy Helpers. So here's the front of the church. You can see clearly the mosaic and everything is in a Catholic style, very different than the Ebenezer's more simple meeting houses. But so this was a church that was used by the Ebenezer Inspiration. This is the Lower Ebenezer Cemetery. As you can see, there's a whole section here that's unmarked. The Ebenezer graves are not marked, but there are some other graves here that have German names. So it's pretty clear that after the Inspirationists left in 1855, that Germans did continue to settle and live in this area. I think in part because there were already German-speaking people here. This is where the cabin of Calcutta was, and this was a famous case. Actually, there's a book called Seneca Spirits about witchcraft. It talks about this landmark case. Tommy Jemmy was a Seneca chief that executed Calcutta for witchcraft, and according to legend, the Ebenezers, they settled some of the Indian-built cabins on the Buffalo Creek Reservation, and according to legend, a few of the Ebenezer Inspirationists saw a ghost of the witch Calcutta and asked Christian Metz if they could move to a different cabin. I wasn't able to find any information on that in my research in Christian Metz's diary or in Gottlieb Schuner's history, but it is sort of a local legend, and so that's why there's the marker for folklore and legends here. Now here is the actual Ebenezer Cemetery section.
of the lower Ebenezer Cemetery. And as you can see, it does have the names marked here, but there are not any marked graves in this section. And then actually back here somewhere is where the Calcato's cabin was said to be. All right, so here we are at the edge of the Buffalo Creek at the site of the Christian Metz home. You can see an old mill. Actually, maybe you can barely see the rooftop over there, but that was also an Ebenezer building. Let's go up to the front of the building here. There's one of the original millstones from the Ebenezer Mill. And here's the Christian Metz house. As I said, a lot of the inspirationists moved into cabins that already existed on the Buffalo Creek Reservation that were built by Indians. So initially, Metz did live in a cabin built by Indians. But so this is his home here. These are also Ebenezer buildings on the rest of this street here too as well. So Christian Metz lived here. This building was erected in 1840. It was the home of George Stannard, operator of the Indian sawmill. And then later, Christian Metz, leader of the Ebenezer Society, occupied this house. And our final stop on our tour of the Ebenezer settlement is here in the Middle Ebenezer Cemetery. Today, this is part of a public park right across the street from the Metz home. The Metz home actually, by the way, is being considered for revision and becoming a museum. Jim Pace, the West Seneca historian, is working on that and everything. As you can see, this cemetery is also unmarked. Pretty overgrown here in the forest. It's been sort of allowed to become a natural open space here. But you can see here are some names. These are the names of the folks buried here at the Middle Ebenezer Cemetery.